Welcome. This will be my spoiler-free review of the 2024 PC game Castle Doombad Classic. So I will start by saying this is a game I really love. There are very few criticisms I have of it. I am not 100% certain about the rating, but I'm thinking it's probably ages 10 and up. This video will be. And yes, so there's not really a plot here. It is which is not okay. So a lot of what I'm going to say is going to be neutral and descriptive, not negative. If something I say, if you're not confident that something I'm saying is negative, if it could be read as just neutral and descriptive, please assume it is neutral and descriptive. Doesn't really have a plot. It is basically just the concept that, you are working for, I think he is just called Doombad, the villain who has captured the princess, brought her to his lair, and you are to keep out any heroes that try to free her. You get a bonus if you manage to keep them from even starting to free her. Like if they are able to, she's in this, like, she's suspended in this thing, and if they get to that thing, they can grab her and they'll start moving out. If they grab her, that will cost you a pretty decent bonus. And if they manage to escape the level, you will have to start it over even if you were on the final wave of the particular level. And there's I suppose this is a good place to talk about. So I have not reviewed other straight tower defense games. I've reviewed games that had elements of it, such as, honestly, I forget which exactly it is, but one of the 5 Assassin's Creed games that I did a video review of had a tower defense element to it. I have played maybe a dozen or so, but most of them I played on my Android, and it's one of those things where I'm not sure that I would say that I've played enough Android games that I feel qualified to give a thorough review of an Android game. But I do by now feel confident that I can do justice to tower defense. I guess a good place to go from here is that this is one of those that, whether you have never played tower defense or you've played a lot, there's something for you here, which I have to admit, when I first read, so right, I guess I should briefly note, so this was part of a bundle. I didn't seek out this game. It was bundled with a game that I did really want, and then, did some research on this, thought that I wanted to play it. Turns out very, very happy that I made that decision. But this could easily be the very first tower defense game you ever play. If I'm not the first person to describe this using the old adage of easy to learn but hard to master. If you've never played one before, then the tutorial levels, which I believe are unskippable, I will say some have said, oh, it's so handholdy. Yeah, but it's like, I think 4 or 5 levels, and some of these levels are like just a few minutes. Like, it's really not a huge, it's not going to take you that long to get through. And after that, you have complete freedom. I appreciate that some would probably say, maybe just have, like, it wouldn't be terrible if when you play those first levels, if there was an option, I believe there isn't currently, as I'm reviewing this, where you could click and say, hey, I can probably figure this out. Just let me experiment and I'll figure it out myself, But yeah, if this is the very first tower defense game you ever played, I can't guarantee you'll be able to get all the way through it. But even if you've played a lot others, once you get past the tutorial, maybe a few more levels, it does start to really, yeah, I found myself really applying myself here. And it is one of those things, I think tower defense can be tremendous enjoyment. I personally have always found one of the things I enjoyed most about RTS were building and maintaining defense. And that's essentially what your average tower defense is, all that. But yeah, this is a good place to talk about. So I'll start by describing your basic tower defense. In my personal experience, haven't played all of them, is that enemies tend to start, in one particular spot and move in a very specific direction, and along the way you can place these defenses. And in a bunch of tower defense games, it is, perhaps not exclusively, but maybe primarily ones that ranged. Where in this, there are several that are not ranged, but, because of where the heroes, which I suppose I should specify, in this game, hero does not mean, this confused me at first. Hero does not mean, like, there are technically, let's go with boss enemies. Hero for this game just means enemy, but it's because you're playing the bad guy, so all the enemies are heroes. But yeah, heroes will, walk through the area, and you can place, for example, spikes. And yeah, this one is not horizontal, as I think every single other tower defense game I've ever played has been. It is vertical, and the enemies might start with just one entrance into a level, but as the waves progress, there will, they might find more paths in there. And that means that suddenly all the traps, which is what this game calls the defensive stuff, all the traps you set for that first entrance might no longer matter, and you have to very quickly, prepare for the new entrance sometimes. And I really appreciated whenever a new entrance is opened, there is a HUD element and a dramatic music sting to let you know. So, in all the time I've played it, there hasn't been a single time, I lost some of the time, but there wasn't even a single time where it was because I didn't realize that a new entrance had opened. And it's also worth noting, just because there are multiple entrances open doesn't mean that all of them will be active at the same time. So, keep checking back to, and I think this might be a good place to put. So I've already talked about the tutorial. I will say, after that, there were times where I found myself a little unsure of what to buy and upgrade. And the thing is that once you've bought and or upgraded anything, that money is spent. Like you have to, outside of levels, you buy and upgrade traps. Inside levels, you construct traps. And there are two different types of, resource you spend on that. So, it doesn't matter how many traps you build, that's not going to take away from what you have that you can spend to buy and, unlock, buy, upgrade, and such. And you cannot resell. So if you end up regretting something you bought or upgraded, that's just, there's not really anything, you'll have to play more levels, and after a while you might have to grind. And that is one of my only real criticisms of this game. I think it would have been great if they let you have like a practice area where you can't make any money to buy an upgrade, but you can test anything before you buy it, before you upgrade it, and see how it does against the different enemies. Because there were some of these things where, like, I barely had a chance to find out, well, how does it work against at least some of the enemies? Like, hypothetically, you could, once you buy something, maybe upgrade it, you could place it early in the level. But if it's better suited for a little later in the level, and yeah, I think that would be an improvement. There were a couple of upgrades and traps that just, they sounded a little different. I think I won't go into too much. I'll just say there's a trapdoor. It works once. And then, if you want to use a trapdoor again, that at least if it's not upgraded. I'm not 100%, I haven't upgraded or absolutely everything, but yeah. If you just buy it and place it, it'll work once, and then you'd have to, sell that trap and construct another one in its place if you want someone else to drop from there, which by itself is, of course, fine. But yeah, there's just some of these. I would also say, I don't know if it's a glitch or if I'm using it wrong, but the what's it called? Slimy tentacles, I think. There's, I believe that's what they're called, and you place them, on ceilings. It seemed to work at first, but then after a while it just stopped doing anything. And it wasn't that it was like destroyed the way that, sometimes your traps can be destroyed. So I wasn't entirely sure about that, and that's the kind of thing where a practice area would be fantastic. I guess I'll briefly note, so some have said that they feel the game speed is too slow, and it is true. Let's see, I appreciate some will find it slow. I didn't personally mind too much, but I will say in early levels it can feel a little, and I think, please correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think right now at least there is not an option to increase the in-game speed. Now, I think that does, yeah, so some more details on the traps. You can't, no matter, like, by the time you're done with the tutorial, you will have more traps than you can carry into any one level if you don't upgrade. I believe that is the case, or maybe, yeah, I believe there's at least one more than you would, yeah. And I will also say, by the time the tutorial is done, you have some very effective traps that you can get a good start with. Right, and someone also noted that at least for a while, you can kind of rely on more or less the same strategy. You don't have to evolve it that much, which they found to be, a letdown. Personally, I found more variety here than in a number of other tower defense games. But I think that, right, and there are definitely, you can tell that this was originally a mobile game. I actually have no idea why I didn't play this one back when I played, because it was after this originally came out on mobile that I played Tower Defense, but I didn't play all of the Tower Defense ones. Anyway, yeah, so I think that does pretty well bring us into, so yes, basically the layer is made up of a bunch of individual squares. There are some where you simply cannot place any traps, but quite a lot of these squares you can place at least one. And on the ones where it's especially open, you can place 3, provided they are, some go on the ceiling, some go on the wall, some go on the floor. And on the ones where there's no obstructions in any of those, you can place for all 3. And you'll definitely experience, there are some that, I guess it's, I'll just briefly note, once you have access to, I think it's called the Acid Dripper, placing that one above spikes, and then up ahead having the upgraded, I think it's called a Scream Generator, because if you upgrade it enough, it will electrify anyone trying to attack it. And heroes are not great at realizing this. They are Bart Simpson going after the cupcakes over and over. And I mean, eventually they will destroy it, and they can harm, they can damage it, even if they, they'll just also, they'll briefly be stunned. And the auto bow nearby, that is a very effective combination of traps. Now, I think that does more or less, I guess, so I haven't really come out and just said it, but yeah, personally, I think it might be really good if this did let you sell some of the traps, or maybe, downgrade something if you buy an upgrade and you're like, I didn't really think this was worth the, Scream coins, I think they're called, that I spent on it, and I know it sounds like some people are going to say, just get good. I do appreciate, I'm normally against respec and, that sort of thing, unless you do it just right. I do think it's great when video games just force you to stick with, and like, yeah, I mean, sometimes it's great to look up a guide, which that's one of the things I was not able to find. I checked GameFAQs. I didn't find a guide to help decide what to spend the coins on, for this one. But yeah, games like System Shock 2 and Deus Ex 1, absolutely love that once you've spent something in those, you can't, get it back. It makes you really consider how you're going to spend it. But then for those, if you really want, there are guides to help you find out, what is, And also, to an extent, you can technically save scum. If you are unsure if you want something, save, buy it, see, use it, and if you just don't like it, just load that save, and that's not an option here. And I think that does more or less covered that aspect. It's very satisfying getting the various traps. And that's also something, I believe there is an achievement if you buy everything and another if you upgrade everything. Obviously, those should only be available if you actually do buy and unlock everything, if hypothetically they did change it so that you could resell anything. But yeah. Let's see, I think... And also, I'm not saying that they have to... I'm not saying they have to do anything, but if the developers were to come upon this video, I would love either practice area where you can test out things, or the ability to resell traps and such. It doesn't have to be both. Now, so the camera is entirely from the side. And there are some that have taken issue with the fact that you do have to, I already mentioned it's vertical. Sometimes, some of the levels at least. I'm not 100% sure if is it all of them? Whatever. At least some of them. When you've defeated one wave, the level will grow either upwards or downwards. And yeah, you have to, move the camera up and down to keep track of the various. You cannot just find a spot roughly in the middle and stay there. That is never gonna work for the more intricate and big levels. So I've already mentioned that, hypothetically you could grind this, and I guess this is a good place to talk about. So yeah, basically, one of the things is some levels you might be able to get through, but you will not be able to keep at least one hero from grabbing the princess and starting to leave. And yeah, sometimes you might find yourself going back and grinding one of the levels where that happened in order to get to a place where you can keep it from happening, so that you get a bonus that is not just an uncrowned pittance, but let's see, what was it? Crown bonus, maybe, or something like that. It's like hundreds of these coins in difference. So, and other than that, there is the Rogue Venge mode as a way to get, coins if you find yourself, as sometimes happens. And this is the thing, I don't know if it only happens if you spend the money badly, or if it's something that might just happen regardless of what you do. But yeah, there were times where I did get to a level and I was like, I don't quite know how to get past this level. Maybe I just can't with the traps and their upgrades as they are now, but I can't afford to do anything else there. And that's a place where Rogue Venge can really come in. So Rogue Venge, I'm going to try really hard to get this right, is Rogue Light, not Rogue Like. I have not played Rogue. I've never played a Rogue Like. I'm not sure I will. I don't think I have the temperament for that kind of thing anymore. Maybe 20 years ago, I would have been able to get into a Rogue Like. But I'm going to define what the two, what a Rogue Like and a Rogue Light is, just in case I completely misunderstood, so that you can mentally exchange for the right term. But from what I understand, a roguelike is like the game Rogue, where basically it is very difficult, and if it has permadeath, and as you play, you get personal experience, but not experience points that stick after permadeath, hence permadeath. Roguelite means that there are, at least for this game, there, you know, the stuff you get during the roguelite carries over to the next run in the Rogue Venge mode, which is roguelite. But that is something that I do think works really well here, because I could definitely imagine, I don't think I came across a review that said that they did either of these, but hypothetically, you can play this, I could imagine you can play all the way through this never using Rogue Venge mode if it's just not your kind of thing. And also, if I recall correctly, Rogue Venge is unlocked maybe right after the tutorial, so that also works as, yeah, it functions as a tutorial for that mode as well. Certainly it's very early on. And yeah, like, if you don't really want to play the regular levels, you could just play Rogue Venge until you get bored or unlock, you know, buy, upgrade, unlock everything. Not necessarily in that order, but yeah, you know, if, and I do really appreciate that. It doesn't really force you to. I did not play that much Rogue Venge personally, but yeah, Rogue Venge definitely is engaging, and it is distinct enough without feeling like it is so different that it's like just a completely different game. The traps are the same. Anything you know, unlock, buy, and maybe even upgrade in one of these modes, you know, that is also the case for the other mode. So yeah, and basically, you know, there are more waves, but at least early on the waves are also smaller than the regular levels. And the yeah, you know, you might spend more minutes on a Rogue Venge. I think they're called Knights, not with a K. And the yeah, you know, you will get some money, pretty much. I think even if you fail really early on, but the longer you last, the more money you'll make. And yeah, you know, if you fail near the end of a night, well, you know, the money you got, maybe those allow you to unlock, buy, upgrade, and you can try again, or you can try some of the story levels and, you know, make some money there. And I think that, yeah, that covers most of Rogue Venge. Other than that, there is this thing of you get these, I forget what they're called, but let's go with skills, where, you know, you might get like 3 options to choose from, and it's like, you know, okay, so and so many more percent defense, or one of them's maybe attack, or something else. And yeah, I forget, but I think it might be after each wave you get one of those. So, you know, you do get more formidable to keep up with the increasing waves. And I think that does, I guess this is a perfectly decent place to put. Other than that, you know, this is one of those games that have a, you know, a bonus if you just, you know, start the game up each day, you know, if you don't play it past that. And not that I've, you know, each day that I have opened it up, but I'm just saying they give you the reward before you start playing for that day, just as soon as you boot the game up. Other than that, there are challenges that are specific to a season. Like recently there was some Christmas related, you know, stuff. And let's see, I think that pretty much gets us to, yeah, so this is entirely controlled with the mouse, and the yeah, you know, if you know how to use a mouse, you'll be fine with the controls here. I wouldn't necessarily make it the very first game you play unless you have good hand-to-eye coordination and reaction speed and such from other things, like sports or something. And yeah, the gameplay is pretty addictive. It's, yeah, you really find yourself just wanting at least a little bit more. There's I don't play that many games that have these kinds of like customization, because some of it is just like aesthetic, but from what I can tell, a pretty decent amount of options there. You can change the appearance of the traps. And so the enemies come in a very nice variety. I did not sit down and count, but I wouldn't rule out there's maybe a dozen different ones that move at different speeds, have different behaviors. There's one that does not, a bunch of them will head directly towards the princess. But then there's, I think he's referred to as the adventurer. I am not entirely sure if it is supposed to be. I swear, it's right on the tip of my tongue. Indiana Jones. I think it might be supposed to be. And he will try to dismantle your traps. And he's really good at it. Like, essentially, I think pretty much any of the heroes can dismantle traps, but some of them are definitely more effective and more eager. Some of them will walk right through or past traps without touching them. But yeah, let's see. I don't think I want to spend forever on. I also want you to be surprised. But yeah, some of the heroes have ranged attacks. Some of them do not. I will definitely tell you, some of them are less susceptible to certain types of traps. The ninja will climb on the ceiling, and thus, if you only have traps on the floor, or maybe the wall, if they're not ranged, they will not, but there are traps for ceilings, and ranged ones will shoot at something on the ceiling as well. Honestly, I will just briefly say, so I was definitely very happy that I upgraded the floor spikes, the auto bow, the acid dripper, the scream generator, and the overactive AC. It was after those where I wasn't always sure that I loved the, and to be clear also, as soon as I think you may have to unlock it first for the ones you have to unlock it, but I'm not entirely sure you even have to buy in order to see, but maybe you do, whatever. You don't have to really upgrade before you can see what the upgrades are, including the later ones. They don't, you can't skip to those upgrades, but you can see what they are, so you can see if you want to build towards that, if you want to save up for that or not. And so there are some more, I think I will call them boss enemies in this, and they have more health. Their attacks are more formidable, but they also move slower, typically at least, than others. And I really appreciate the pop culture references in there, because like, I don't know if I want to give too much away of that, but I will just say whether or not you miss the show Baywatch, this has something for you. And it was very cool seeing Rambo in here. And there's also this, like, one of the more powerful ones. I think he's called the Hunky Knight. Yeah, he rides on this steed, and he pauses every so often to take a selfie. And yeah, like, he's just moving like he's got all the time in the world. He is OP and he knows it, and he's just like sleepwalking through the obstacles. And I have to admit, I've played enough power fantasy video games to feel very called out, but also seen, so it evens out. And I think that does, yeah, I really appreciated that, the fact that some of these, for example, Rambo, he sure does love to take out perhaps especially very certain traps of yours. And you can use that to slow him down, because he doesn't think about, wait, if I stand here attacking that trap, I'm actually technically really vulnerable because there's something underneath me and something above me that's attacking me right now. I would actually get more out of just moving past the trap, leaving it intact. So, quite appreciate that, the way that the tactics, can really come in. And yeah. And I think that might... Yeah, I really appreciate how many different enemies you have to juggle, keep track of, notice where are they coming from, what does this one do, that sort of thing. And let's see, yeah, and the AI is quite smooth. I never experienced one of them just like not knowing, yeah, some of them will just move through traps, some of them will try to dismantle them, but regardless, they will always, I never experienced one just like stopping and not doing anything because of a certain trap or something, because obviously that would be kind of boring. Like, you might be able to put something in the enemy's path, the hero's path, that can, prevent them from moving further ahead before they destroy something. Then they'll work on destroying it, I think that does bring us to... So there is some linearity. You basically do have to, at the very start, one of the layers will be available to you. And once one layer is available to you, you have to, there's 15 individual levels per layer. And you do have to complete most of those in order. But some of them you unlock by getting crowns, which you get by completing a level without a hero grabbing the princess. And that's further, that might also have you grinding until you can complete a level without the princess getting grabbed. And those you can access even if you didn't complete all the levels leading up to it. And right now I forget if it's anything other than crowns, but at least some of the time I believe it is crowns, is also how you unlock additional layers, which does mean that some of the layers you'll be able to start on even if you didn't complete every individual level of all the previous layers, which I do quite appreciate. And each layer has something unique to it that I found quite delightful. I don't think I really want to give too much away. I'll just say I really appreciate, they really put effort into thinking of ones that are distinct from each other and fun and sometimes really weird and just like, yeah. Let's see, I think, but yeah, once you start on a new layer, you will want to pay close attention to if something is maybe different from the layers leading up to it, because there are times where I'm going to go ahead and just say the following. I'll keep it vague so as to not spoil. But hypothetically, if a hero does something in a layer that means that suddenly you can't see something that you used to be able to see, there might be something in that layer that you have to turn off and turn on again. And I guess if you have problems with a computer and it's sufficiently dark and dingy, you might get IT help from Pennywise. And I think that does bring... Yeah, so I understand that originally this didn't have as many, layers and levels as it by now has, and there's even, one of the layers says coming soon rather than listing how many crowns you need to unlock it. And yeah, that is something I do quite appreciate. I mean, this game isn't even that old, not much more than a year by now, and they already... Well, let's see, I guess it's possible at least some of those were from the mobile version, which is older. But anyway, I believe. Anyway, moving on. Let's see. I guess that does pretty much bring us to... Yeah, the atmosphere is great. It's got this, like, so, you are playing, you're working for the villain, but it's not like scary and like outright dark. It's this kind of... Honestly, Doombad himself stepped right out of like a Saturday morning cartoon. Like, there's some like Skeletor or Shredder going on there, and I'm here for it. And yeah, it doesn't particularly have cutscenes. Essentially, like, some levels you might get, right, even past the tutorial, there might be like little hints and such, but that's as close as it gets to cutscenes, just Doombad explaining a new concept to you in engine. And yeah, the graphics, straddle a good line between, it looks good, but it's not like... It's not trying to look like photorealistic or something. The art style is this kind of, yeah, Saturday morning cartoon or comic book kind of thing. The audio design is great. You always, like, as soon as... When you meet a new enemy, as soon as they attack something, you'll immediately get a sense of, like, even if you're not, like, looking at the health, let's go with that, of the trap they're attacking, you still, immediately can tell, if this is something really, really powerful or not. And I think that does... Yeah, there's a satisfying crunch to the traps you set. I'm not going to give anything away, but, the sound of the spikes protruding, the sound of the auto bow, the drip of the acid drip or stuff like that, it feels like power. You know, I wonder if that's how ice feels. Which hopefully there will be enough of an atmosphere against them that it's, I'm not hoping for any violence, obviously, but yeah, I think, we can at this point, many of us, hopefully most of us, agree that they are out of control, and those who have done something horrible should be tried, and they should, bare minimum, change the training and environment, and maybe even be like dismantled. I'm not saying that there wouldn't necessarily be, it's possible you'd have to put something in its place, but I think a case could be made that it is simply too toxic to ever be trusted again. And yeah, I think at this point Doombad might be one of the only people who's still 100% on the side of ice. But yeah, let's see. Yes, the various noises that the heroes make when taking damage, when perishing, stuff like that, really works well. There's a lot of personality to each hero in this, especially the boss ones. The music genuinely feels like something that Danny Elfman would make for a Tim Burton movie, one of his more whimsical ones, not necessarily one of the ones that are directly like comic book or the like. Or, yeah, Sam Raimi, perhaps especially his comic book movies. And it works incredibly well. And it does that great thing where it changes when it's especially tense. So if a hero grabs the princess, the music increases in tempo until she is returned. And which, if you get to the end of that wave, if there is another wave after that, she will be put back into a container. And the container actually is moved, or let's see, I guess, yeah, she's moved to another container, which of course prompts some of the heroes to go, our princess is in another container. And right, and it is not a spoiler to say, yeah, the initial layer is indeed a castle. And some of the first heroes are like knights with armor that makes them tougher to injure. The armor has to be chipped away at by some of the traps before they can do a lot of damage, compared to some of the ones that don't have armor. And I think that does bring us right. And also, if one of the heroes grabs the princess, Doombad himself will shout "No!" until the wave has ended. And yeah, I think it does a good job at challenge. And a lot of the time it does feel fair. Like there's a lot you have to juggle to make it far into the game, but like I mentioned, when a new entrance is opened, you are warned. You can also see the heroes before they go through the entrance. You cannot attack them, no matter how close the ranged weapon is to the entrance, before they've entered through the entrance, but you can see the ones that are out there, and they move just slowly enough that you have a decent chance to, because, yeah, you'll see, oh, that's a ninja, better make some auto bows. Or, oh, there's a boss enemy there, I got to make sure to throw a lot in their path. And I think that pretty much covers. So yeah, I also found getting achievements to lend to a sense of achievement. And so replayability, once you've played any one level until you've gotten the crown, you're not necessarily going to replay that one unless you're using that as a stand-in for, I mentioned like practice area, which, you know what, this is a decent enough time for me to expand on. So part of why I'm saying that that's not, in my opinion, that's not quite enough, is that some of the enemies that you especially have to prepare for, by the time you actually start encountering them, it's in such late levels that there's so much else going on that it's difficult for you to pay close attention to how exactly that particular enemy, how they react to specific traps. And let's see. Yeah, so the level design is quite good. I did not play Rogue Venge quite enough to say for sure, but I think those are procedurally generated, the layers and levels in those. And certainly the what I did play, it didn't like lead me into like I never ended up in, stuck in a corner or something. There was always just enough space for me to place traps. That's also something I thought they did a really good job on. Some of them, they will have some, horizontal, like hypothetically, maybe each hero will have to start at the very bottom and get up across like 3 different, additional floors, and each floor they'll have to walk across floor for maybe like 7 of these squares. That obviously means that you can just place a bunch of stuff across those squares. Then later, maybe some of the squares don't have a floor, so you can't place floor ones there. Some of them, maybe, there are less places where you can place traps. Maybe there's something on the ceiling already. Maybe the floor has some quality to, prevent that sort of thing. And then sometimes there won't be very many squares that they have to move across to get to the princess at all. So you have to be extremely selective about what you place in those squares. And yeah, also found they got a lot out of both the, of the chutes and ladders. I mean, ladders and doors. And I think that does pretty much, one of the things is that the ladder is a really good spot for the acid dripper, and you can frequently place spikes at the bottom of the ladder as well. And the doors, but the ladders do also, maybe there are more ladders in a small area than you would like, so they don't have to walk very far to get to the next ladder. And the doors mean that you have to pay close attention to what door leads where, because there are times where it's not 100%. Early on, it's like, oh, okay, I mean, that door's gotta lead there. But later, that's not really the case. And so if you see, oh, that's a boss enemy, he's moving into a door, you might regret if you didn't pay close attention to where that door leads, so that you can put stuff in the path on the other side of that door, And yeah, I think it also works very well that it's not that the heroes do not win by reaching the princess. They have to grab her, and then they have to get to an exit. And that, of course, means that you have to pay very close attention to where, right, and any entrance is also an exit. And I think that does pretty well. But yeah, really, really solid level design. I did not run into two levels that felt the same, keeping in mind each layer has 15 levels, so there's a lot of room for them to just copy paste something, you know. But yeah, and as soon as I played Rogue Venge, it was like, well, I mean, this is not one of the levels from the main campaign. Let's see. Yeah, I think they do a really great job of making it feel like each of these layers, it really is like, did you ever watch that Dropout video sketch where, I'm afraid I forget her name right now, which sucks because I do really like her. She's the one who also plays Precious Plum and Mary-Kate and Ashley. But yeah, I think it's called Evil Real Estate, something like that, you know. And yeah, she shows a bunch of places, and to her, it's like, well, you know, this is a place you could do some evil. And that's very much the vibe of the levels of this game. It's like, well, you know, I wouldn't want to live there, but this is technically my place. Couldn't decide between place or space. And yeah, I felt that they tended to not throw too many new elements at you. Like, hypothetically, you know, if someone, you know, lets you try this game, you know, unless you already have a lot of experience with, you know, this is not one of those games where you'll be fine if you jump in like halfway through the game, because there's so many things to keep track of. But yeah, it eases you into a lot of them. You know, there are some levels where you might meet multiple new heroes, but by then you're at a point where it's like, well, you know, I faced so many others, so you just pay close attention to what they do and you act accordingly. You know, there are some levels where you'll definitely want to sell some of the traps instead of just letting enemies destroy them. And yeah, I think, yeah, that's very much, you know, do not feel bad. Like, if at some point you're playing this and you're like, oh, you know, I guess that trap is not ideal for this current situation, just sell it. You know, put something else in its place that you feel makes more sense. You know, there's no, yeah. And I just realized I have not actually, these days I try to always recommend a video from a fellow leftist YouTuber. So I would normally not use two of the words I'm about to, but this, you know, me saying the full title will make it easier for you to find the video. So, some more news. Recently uploaded a video. Let's see if I can recall, because my research is sort of checked for sure right now, but I believe it's called 5 Dumb Guys Being Idiots. And yeah, it's really, really excellent, as their videos tend to be. Yeah, I believe that covers everything. Okay, I'm just real quick gonna mentally fast forward through. I think it works really well that when, you know, from right away, you can see how many crowns you would need to unlock additional layers. And as soon as you start playing any of the layers, you can see how many crowns you'd need to unlock. I forget if it's always 3, but at least some of the times it's 3. It's the last ones of that one, and they're referred to as sinister layers or something along those lines, sinister levels maybe. And yeah, those are an additional challenge. And yeah, it's very, very satisfying to be, you know, to, yeah, see how the number of crowns you have, which is always visible, you know, before you select which exact level you're going to play, layer and level. You know, you see how many you have, and then you see, oh, you know, if you had just this many more crowns, you could try this one. You know, that's very, on more than one occasion, I found myself thinking, okay, I gotta see, because it's, yeah, the sinister ones are some of the most fun. And I think that might... I don't know if I've made a big enough deal about, like, I really do love how wonderfully creative and absurd they got with some of these traps. I don't think I want to give more of them away than I have. I guess I'll just briefly note. So overactive AC slows down enemies. You know, it's that kind of... I forget if that's called a buff or a debuff or what, but you know, it's one of those things. And there's plenty of games that have that. You know, okay, you can slow down enemies, or sometimes enemies can slow you down. But to have it be an overactive AC is just such a wonderful... Because, like, what? Like, why wouldn't you have an AC? The princess is right there. Doombad is in the building. Like, you want them to just boil? What's wrong with you? But yeah, there's a... it's really great. Like, even ones that you don't buy immediately, just as right. And some of the traps, you can't see what they are before you buy more, and it'll tell you how many you have to buy. And that was another thing where I found myself sitting there thinking, I gotta know what's next there. And yeah, each time it was just like they really put effort into thinking of just things that are just wonderful to put there, you know, like... and you know, it starts with very straightforward stuff, like, you know, okay, spikes in the floor. I'm not the only person who loves 1989's Prince of Persia, but you know, after a while they do get to be just... yeah. And none of them... the ones I bought, I found something great about each of them, you know. I don't know if I've made it clear enough yet, so I think I will just finish off that. Basically, one of the things is some of the heroes reacted differently to some of the traps, or maybe trap upgrades, than I anticipated from reading about the... but I will say, a lot of them, they are really good about telling you, hey, this is how this thing works. For example, there is a treadmill that straight up does tell you this is only going to, you know, it will... let's go with Stunlock. One, but only one hero. And I think it's basically first come, first serve, you know, but yeah, that hero will be on there until he perishes at the hands of your traps. And then the next hero that gets on there. And see, I think that's where I thought that the trapdoor might work in the same way. And, you know, right now I'm actually not 100% sure. I didn't end up using it terribly much. I found others that worked more because I didn't really have a practice area where I could find out if, yeah. From what, you know, when I used it, it seemed like maybe it's just before it's upgraded enough. But yeah, you know, it'll work once and then you'd have to sell it and buy a new one if you want more heroes to fall through the floor there. But I think... now I remember what it was I wanted to say. So it's really great the way that you can stack and compound some of these. You know, not everything works incredibly well as, like, you know, backing up each other kind of things. But, you know, for example, if you know that you're facing enemies where auto bow, you know, would be good. You know, if you have like 7 squares on one floor where, you know, like if all 7, you know, could hypothetically use auto bow, yeah, place auto bows on all of them. You know, it can really build wonderfully there. Just be aware that some of the heroes will try to dismantle them, and some of them are very, you know, they have gotten exceedingly good at it. Yeah, I think that does cover I like the decision to not have Doombad speak words a lot of the time. He kind of just grumbles, and then you understand what he said because there's like speech bubbles. You know, his no is very clear because for that they do need to, you know, convey to the player, hey, if you're not careful, like, you could lose within seconds now, you know. But yeah, if you, for some reason, find yourself thinking that you're only going to play one tower defense game, right now, I think this would be my recommend for just that one, because it really does have so much. Yeah, I believe that covers everything. So I guess I'll briefly note, I don't know, if, you know, I would probably say, you know, it's best to get it on sale, but I don't know how much that means coming from me, because I always say that, you know, I never, I would pretty much always say, you know, wait for a sale, unless it's just completely impossible situation to do. I guess I'll briefly note, I forget where, but I saw somewhere that this was supposed to be like 2 hours long. Maybe it was before they added as many layers. I wouldn't rule out, like, hypothetically, if that's from back when there was like 1 or 2 layers, you know, I mean, right now, right, let's see. I did the, where did I think there's like 6 by now, because I definitely saw somewhere that you can get 90 crowns, because that's how you unlock. I think you need 90 or close to 90 to unlock at least one of the sinister levels. So yeah, I wouldn't rule out if it was still like 15 or 30 levels, then you could do it in 2 hours, but not anymore. Or maybe that's just me. Yeah, I think that covers everything. So hopefully I have helped you make a decision on whether or not to go for this one. I guess I'll briefly note, I mean, obviously, ultimately, if you just don't really like tower defense, like, you know, personally, I think I might play more tower defense, but I would definitely say, you know, oh, right, I think I actually, do I already have a tower defense that has that? One thing that I would personally, I'm not saying that's something this game needs, but something I find, you know, really appealing about, yeah, if there's a tower defense where you can also like move around in the level and personally attack the enemies that come in addition to building the tower for defense, yeah, but then I almost always say that. There's very, very few games. You know, that's one of the things where I got super into, I think it's called Uprising, and there was also a while where I was really into the, you know what, I don't think I remember what the other one was called, and I don't think it matters because I never got that good at it, but there was a real-time strategy game that, like, where you are like, it's you're there on the ground and you're driving a vehicle. It's not Uprising, but yeah. Um, but yeah, I'm absolutely not saying that this game needed that. And there is like a sequel on the way, which I have already wishlisted. You know, so yeah, I'm really looking forward to more of this, because it's one of those things where simultaneously I feel like this is a very complete game, but at the same time I can also see you could probably come up with something that would make it even more, you know, kind of like how, I mean, I think by the time of Yuri's Revenge, to me personally, Command Conquer franchise overall felt like, okay, wow, they're really nailing it by now. You know, I'm not the biggest fan of the tone, but once you get past that, And I do recommend, I mean, okay, so the game's 25 years old by now. I'm not, whatever, close to 25 years. I get people are not necessarily going to go back to it now, but back when it came out, it's, but then, then they went ahead and made Generals, and I was like, not sure how they could top this. And then they made 0 Hour, and it's like, wow. So that, I think, covers it. Right, I do also think this one does a good job of, like, having, like, there's the sort of vicarious thrill of, like, in real life, we try not to be, to do something just really abhorrent and evil. Sorry, I'm referring to people who are not, far-right conservatives, who are politicians and or media personalities. That those obviously are not, counted amongst those. I'm not saying they're not human. They're obviously human, but they are choosing to do really horrendous things, and we should call them out whenever we see it and non-violently fight back as much as we can. But yeah, so in video games sometimes it can be fun to, be on the bad side or something, and this one also isn't so intense that it feels like, okay, some people are definitely going to take issue with the fact that technically the way to build traps in this, there's a scream economy, and I already mentioned you can make scream generators that provide additional, but in addition, it is the princess's intermittent screams that mean that you can build traps. So as you play a level of this, you will every so often hear the princess scream, and you can also see her suspended in the thing. So, right, that's another thing. I'm pretty sure, at least, she does not scream when she's been grabbed by one of the heroes. So you are not making anything from her screams. You might still have scream generators. So that's another reason to, try to avoid that. Oh, I guess I'll briefly note, so there's technically also, there's this thing that puts extra armor on the thing that the princess is suspended in, but it's, limited use and does not last forever. And then there's also this thing where you can fire missiles that take out every single hero within the layer, which is also very limited use, Oh, and I think oh, right. I can't believe I almost completely neglected to mention. Good thing I didn't end the video yet. Yes, I hope you agree. I hope this isn't dreadfully boring. Yes, you have the, you can increase how many traps you bring into a level, and you can only use those, no matter how many you have unlocked, bought, and upgraded outside. And you can also, but it's very expensive to increase how many slots for traps to bring into a level. And then there is also this, let's see, I guess I think it's Doombad's office that you can, you can place items in that you get as you play through this, and, they might have, like, maybe they add some certain percentage. I guess I'll briefly note. So what I definitely found myself using most there were the ones that increase the percentage of damage. I think maybe one of them was health. Was one of them maybe something about preventing dismantlers? But yeah. And early on, you can only place, like, a few of those, but you can upgrade to the point where I think you can place 7. There's 7 slots. Some of them take up more than 1 slot, but yeah. And those you can also just exchange in between levels at any time. And if I recall correctly, there's an additional different economy for those. And I do think it works well that there are multiple economies like that. I suppose I wouldn't necessarily have hated if upgrading traps cost something different from the coins cost something other than the coins you also use for buying traps, because that's definitely a place where I was like, well, which one is more beneficial right now? Should I upgrade or should I buy a new one? And that's where practice mode. Yeah, I think I have made my point, and I believe that covers absolutely everything. Yeah, so yeah, and it's also just, it's a fun perspective, you know, like there's so many games where you're rescuing someone, some of the time a princess, and so to be the one to slow down the heroes, you know, and genuinely like that, yeah, parts of this had me feeling like I was designing, you know, a level for someone else to play a Super Mario game through, you know. And that genuinely is, that's I love when video games can just do something that, you know, we don't see all the time. You know, I love platformers. It's one of my favorite genres. You know, if you go in the description box of this video, there is a link to every video game that I've played to completion, ranked worst to best, and you'll note that platformer is one of the ones that has the most games in there. But yeah, it was really cool to see. Actually, I suppose I wouldn't, I don't know, it would be very different, but maybe they could do it for 2 or even 3 or something. It would be kind of fun to be, you know, if there was a thing where, I mean, hypothetically, you could make it like asymmetrical multiplayer or something, where one player builds a level in this and maybe keeps adding traps during the play, and another player maybe controls an army of heroes and chooses when and where to send which ones, and maybe even in like first person or third person perspective themselves controls a boss enemy and tries to get to, you know, the princess. I think that could be, but I'm not saying that that needs to be part of one of these. Yeah, I rate this 8 wonderful, creative, effective, and memorable traps set in the path of tireless heroes searching to free the princess from Doombad out of 10.